to increase spending. Breaking news at townhall.com. President Trump deleted a racist social media post after a backlash from some Republican allies in Congress.
The president posted a video portraying former President Obama and his wife as apes in a jungle. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended the meme, telling critics to stop the fake outrage. But the video, which has since been removed, was denounced by Democrats and Republicans alike. Among them was Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, a Trump ally and the only black Republican in the Senate, who called the video the most racist thing I've seen out of this White House. Greg Clugston, Washington.
The biggest battle in this year's Super Bowl may not involve football players. The real contest this Sunday will be off the field as advertisers compete with one another to win over the 120 million plus viewers. Dozens of advertisers plan to be pulling out all the stops in their TV ads for Super Bowl 60. More at townhall.com.
Join your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt on our weekly radio hour, Chief Guard of the Republic, where we talk about all things national security, defense, personal security, safety, and dealing with law enforcement situations. Call in 847-931-1410. Ask us questions. We will get you answers. Every week, Saturday, noon to 1 on 1410 AM WRMN Elgin. Streaming on WRMN1410.com. Chat with us on WRMN's YouTube Live channel.
Chicago defense attorney Mark Schieblo has co-authored the book titled DUI Jury Trial, which is a true story of a DUI case that he defended. The accused was an Illinois truck driver arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. This book contains facts about the case from the date of the arrest up to the jury's verdict, and this nonfiction novel also includes the transcripts from the jury trial itself. The book DUI Jury Trial is now available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
Hi, everyone. This is the Chief Guard of the Republic radio show with your co-hosts today, Paul Burvitt and Marla Mutis. We're on every Saturday, noon till 2 on WRMN 1410, which is the Fox Valley Media Network, streaming live on WRMN1410.com. And voice number is 847-931-1410. Our text number is 505-926-1410. Or contact us in the comments on Facebook Live, WRMN 1410 channel. Now, before we start, the information on this show is for informational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice on any subject matter. The views put forward on this show are the opinions of the hosts Paul Burvitt and Marla Mutis, their guests, callers, and not necessarily those of WRMN 1410. Now, today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about historical things, but historical things in a different kind of way. We're going to talk about some things that have happened both in Chicago, in the Midwest, of a climate nature or of a natural disaster type nature. We both realized in talking about preparing for the show that there's a lot of things that happened in Chicago or in the Chicago area.
We experienced as kids.
Right, and so we wanted to
firsthand.
We wanted to talk about it and its impact on everyone. There's a lot of interesting things. The first thing we'd like to talk about, and a lot of people have stories about this that are a little older. It was the what they call the famous 1967 Chicago blizzard. Okay, now I was about 7 years old, and Marla was much younger, and it happened like around January 26th through the 27th of 1967. And what had happened in 2 days, there was a crippling storm that started like a day or two before. It was like 60 degrees. So a lot of people, thought it was going to be early spring and things like that. And what happened was this horrible blizzard happened, and it started at night. And we got, at the end of the 2 days, we got 23 inches of snow. Now,
I used to live near to Chicago lawn, in the Chicago lawn area near Market Park. I was near to Pulaski, but I was 6 years old, and uh, my house that I used to live at was like maybe seven houses east of Pulaski. And I remember opening opening the drapes, and I'm alone. My mother was in the house, but I was alone in the living room, and I opened the drapes, and all I could see was white, and I was smart enough not to, run out or whatever, but I did open the front door, and I actually tried to open, well, I did open the screen door, maybe a few inches, and I was able, because I'm small, I'm able to look out left and right and across. And the one thing that really got me, and I remember it to this day, is that it was light out. It was I almost want to say it was sunny, but it was at least bright and light out. And I remember total silence, and that was unusual for me because I lived near Pulaski Avenue, Pulaski Road, I should say, right, and near Springfield, which is the block east of Pulaski. And I remember that there was nothing moving, and it was, whether I looked right, left, or forward, there was nothing moving. No trucks, no buses, no people were out, and I remember just the total silence. And as from a child's perspective, um, I kept thinking, well, what if we needed help? What if we needed to go somewhere? And it was frightening for me, but I had never experienced that since, except '79 was pretty bad. But what do you remember,
well,
Paul?
it was, I remember going out. I lived on 1920 West Garfield Boulevard, so that's around 55th and Winchester. And I remember going out at night, and you could see the snow. It was coming out. It was like you were living in a snow globe. Okay. And it started out, slow, and then it became heavier and heavier as the night progressed. Okay. And I remember by morning it was so unexpected. Okay. And what they found out later was this was the first what they realized was a heavy lake effect snow. And I remember we lived in an apartment building, and they had clotheslines, and with the way that the snow went, it formed like almost like a structure in the back. And I remember the next day my dad dug a hole, and it was like an igloo, and it was just incredible. And there were there's tons of stories about people that couldn't get home from work. They slept in their offices. They went to hotels. And I remember my cousin and some people I worked with were CTA bus drivers. And at the time, they really didn't use antifreeze. And so the story I heard anecdotally was that to protect the engines from getting a frozen block, that all the bus drivers were instructed to cut the water hoses and let the buses drain out. So it caused a tremendous repair problem later on, because they had to get access to hoses to get the buses back in service. And then I remember there's a famous picture, I think from the Tribune or the Sun Times, where the last loaf of bread, there was a market near our house on Marla's house on 79th and Pulaski, and they showed
79?
it was,
That was 60s.
yeah, it was 79, and it was the last loaf of bread in the store. And then there were stories about how snowmobiles were a new thing. It was a new fad back then, and people were using snowmobiles to transport people to either get food or go to the doctor or go to the hospital. And then I remember they had to land the Chicago Fire Department helicopter to take somebody to the hospital. I mean, it was just incredible, and the city was totally unprepared for it. Yeah, they were caught, because satellites were, the big thing was weather radar. It used to be, even the radio stations would put ads out, we have weather radar, but it was such an unusual and freak thing that it caught people by surprise. And in fact, a lot of people date things by, what did you do during the blizzard? That there were.
I stayed home.
Yeah,
I didn't go.
everybody pretty much stayed home, and there's stories about, even after the blizzard, about how there would be these huge snow icebergs that would be at the end of driveways of stores and stuff like that, that would last through the spring and into the summer. And later on, when we moved by Ford City, the people were talking about how the icebergs were there until like July. It was just incredible, and there's so many stories of people doing heroic things and digging people out and helping people, and in the tragedy, a lot of beneficial things came out of it. So it was kind of wild.
I lived in a. Would you say I lived in a Chicago bungalow?
Yes.
Would you call it a bungalow?
Yes.
It wasn't a large one, but I remember when I mentioned earlier, I opened the door. It was kind of cold air, obviously, too. I remember that the snow was. I had like what, 5, 6 stairs up this
Yes.
house, something like that. Maybe 7 with the landing. Maybe not. But I remember that was the only time the snow was all the way. I couldn't see the stairs. I had banisters. I could barely see the banisters, and obviously I didn't go out. But because of this happening in my life, I've always made sure at wintertime to try, to have enough extra food in that. But yeah, things could go out that I didn't even know about back then. The heat, obviously the electric. People get sick. There's emergencies, and I mentioned earlier, again, what was so strange about that to me, besides the white snow, couldn't see my stairs, was the Pulaski there was nothing going. It was just like, and then there's silence.
It was
because nothing's moving.
It was total silence.
Under I don't think there were birds out there either.
No, you could walk outside, and
I didn't walk out. I just
you could just. It was so quiet, and it was so it was eerie. It was like it was just like you were on another planet. Like an ice planet. It was like unbelievable.
But then it hits you that you're like, am I alone?
Right.
And I didn't realize that. I guess people had pipes break and things like that, right?
They did, and there wasn't an easy way to get to people. It was kind of
right. I remember my father said that, what if I remember that night, I think he said, what if somebody needed an ambulance? This is scary. And my dad's brother used to work on Archer and near Kedzie, and he lived in Burbank, and he actually walked to our house, and he walked home, and he got a little sick from that. So I mean, obviously, and he stayed with us, I think, a while, but he wanted to get back to his family, and it was just a sad situation to have to go through this for anyone, I think, right?
It was.
And probably people were stuck at work too. I mean, city. What happened downtown with the loop? Was it?
Oh, it was all. Yeah. I do remember there was 1 or 2 couples that were down there that got married, and they stayed downtown.
Before or after?
Just before the blizzard, and it was just incredible, and then people were stuck at their businesses. They couldn't get home. Families were separated for days sometimes, and it was just unusual. I'm a real big historical aficionado, and it in some ways it parallels this blizzard that occurred in New York in 1888. They didn't have radio then, and the blizzard came off the ocean, and there was no way for the ships to let people know. Same thing. It was like 60 degrees. And by 1888, they didn't really have a lot of natural gas and no electricity type stuff really. but people were getting day orders of coal for their stoves in their houses and for heating, and they were going to markets daily. Well, they got inundated with this blizzard in 1888, and people had no heat. At least here we had indoor plumbing and heat and things like that. But there's a famous story about Teddy Roosevelt was supposed to go on a job interview, and he ventured out in the blizzard, and it was on an L platform, and he jumped down in the snow to go to the interview, and the man wasn't there. And he wrote him a note. He goes, I made my appointment. I wouldn't want to work for somebody like you who can't keep his word. Or I think he went on to become the police commissioner, and then the vice president, and then the before that the Rough Rider, and then the president. So there's a lot of parallels in it where the storms were unexpected, and yet we had kind of had satellites and telecommunications, but the blizzard of '67 was quite a
pictures. If I knew we were going to do this, I would have maybe dug in and found them. But I do have pictures, and again, just to have a Chicago, I guess word bungalow you're calling it, and cannot see your stairs, and it's really and everything was glistening. It was white because no one was really shoveling either, right?
Right. Well,
until it settled, because it kept coming down.
Yeah, and it was thick, and snow blowers weren't real popular and things like that. It was really rough. If you had to dig yourself out, you had to dig yourself out by hand. Cars were getting stuck, blocking roads.
That wasn't the first day. The first day they weren't
right.
The second day, and then I noticed there were cars, but it's in our memories, and it's in Chicagoland's past, I guess.
Okay, so now,
but
sticking with 1967, and just about 4 months later was another event that a lot of people in the Chicago area know and mark as a milestone, which was the tornado in Oak Lawn on April the 21st, 1967. Now, this happened at 5:30 p.m. on a weekday, okay? And the tornado hit at first, it touched down 5 miles west of Oak Lawn on 105th and Keene, okay? And the tornado then went on to strike hometown, Evergreen Park, and Chicago. And, at the time, I don't know if it's been revised or anything like that, but it was considered to have been a 200-mile-an-hour storm.
My mother and I was still 6. I was almost 7. And my mother that day took me we were going to go to the Choral Theater on 95th and near Cicero. It's torn down now, but it's near where the Walgreens is now, a little bit farther east. But same side of the street. And I remember that growing up, once in a while I'd go to the different shows. We used to go to Evergreen Park Theater, and a lot of times we would go to this choral theater, although I lived in Chicago. And I remember I was pretty well behaved, and it was somewhat a nice day, but it looked a little bit like October in some way. And you mentioned this was April?
Yes.
I remember that day to this moment. And we went out. We were going to go to the show, to a matinee a little after lunchtime, maybe around 1 o'clock, and got out of the car. And my mother had forgotten something in the car. She was looking for something in the car. So she probably forgot it, right? And I remember that I was standing there, and as I was standing there, I told her I was cold. And she went and got me, I don't know, something out of the car. I don't know if it was a scarf or something. And I remember she was still looking for something, and it was paper or whatever. And I'm standing there, and we walk near to the theater entrance, and I'm I don't know what happened, but I was facing north, and I noticed that there was a real cold wind that came from the lake and from, I guess now I know it was near O'Hare. And I noticed that the sky was a dark, and it was darker, it was green, and I just had this eerie feeling. And I told her I didn't want to go, and she says, "Why don't you want to go?" I just don't want to go, and I never did that in my whole life that I remember. And we left, and I remember in the news reading about, because we used to watch TV, the evening news, right? I remember that I saw on the news what happened, and my mom's sister lived over, actually, I believe, near Oak Lawn. Um, it's funny because the week before the Saturday, this was a weekday, right?
It was a Friday, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes, I think the Saturday or Sunday before, we went to a store right at Southwest Highway and 95th, and that area was just starting to be developed in the late 60s. Um, I believe it may be Chicago Ridge, Illinois now, right?
Right.
And I just remember that how frightened I was because I watched the news, and I says, we were just at that store last weekend. And it was a grocery. I want to say it was a Jewel, but it may not have been. It was something that was some type of grocery store like a Jewel or a Jewel. And I kept thinking, feeling and praying for all those people as we go through our lives, and we're in our 60s now, mid 60s, right? I remember, now that I'm out in this area a little more, to shop and whatever, I remember how what happened, and then how sad now it must be for people like us who were kids at that time and lost somebody, or how tragic this was. And the Oak Lawn Library is a great resource. You actually are holding something we picked up. They have brochures on the history of Oak Lawn. I think Ace Hardware, where's that, on 111th
Yeah,
near?
there's a book that's been published
Yeah,
about
they
it
have
too.
it at 111th east of Southwest Highway, right, Paul?
Yes.
And they there's history on all this, and as we get older and time passes on, this history of even what you mentioned earlier, Paul, of the blizzard and the tornado and other things. I'm actually someone who was not witnessing, but in a school where that airplane crashed in 72. We're not. Are we talking about
Yes.
this? We
Yes.
are
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about that today. Okay. I mean, all this. I want to call it memorable. It's not good things, but I mean, it's just history that there's still people like us who are alive that lived through a lot of this, that could give first testament accounts of what happened. So with regards to the tornado, though, it was Oaklawn's built up a lot now, but it was horrific. And I listen to or read media, and there's still people that would say, I lost my dad, or my brother and I were somewhere, and we lost our house, and I knew people at the roller rink and all. You actually were at that roller rink, right?
Uh-huh.
I remember I remember uh asking my father and mother, could I just go into that roller rink to see what it looked like when I was little. I never went in there to uh, skate. But I remember, like, a couple weeks before, we walked in there, and I looked to see what it was like. And you actually were in it, right?
Yeah. Later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when it
Much
was
later.
rebuilt.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was. Why did this tornado happen? It was just
There
a
was
front of.
that
You said
week
there was.
that week from April 16th to the 22nd.
Yeah.
There was an unusual weather pattern of high humidity for that year, and
And again, we were little, so I mean, we were
it
children.
created an unstable atmosphere,
Okay.
and there
And it
were
started where? It didn't start in Oakland. You said
they
it started
started way on the
south.
plains, yeah, but
Did they have
there were
destruction,
like
or
yeah,
the
well,
same
yeah.
occurrence? Was this all in Oak Lawn, and a little bit east, or was it bad out in Plainfield and all those areas?
Well, there were 7 tornadoes that day. along a 75-mile front from Geneva, Elgin, Peatone,
Was it from
Woodstock.
north?
No, it came all from the west.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it was Geneva, Elgin, Peatone, Woodstock, Lake Zurich, Barrington Hills.
But I clearly remember, and I'm one of the few people that says it,
We're
that
going
it
great.
was from the lake and from the hill.
We're going to. We'll see you after the break.
Want to read some action-packed, exciting pulp fiction? Read the works of Michael Tooman, now featuring their international crime thriller, I Married a Bot Madam. Available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle editions. The paperback is also available at other book retailers. Check out Michael Tooman's webpage at Scilink.net. That's Papa, Sierra, Yankee, Lima, India, November, Kilo. Dot, November, Echo, Tango.
Looking to buy or sell a home in Chicagoland? Need trusted legal help with real estate, evictions, or estate planning? Turn to Guthrie & Brady, the happy lawyers serving the greater Chicago area since 1965. With over 50 years of experience, they handle titles and deeds, foreclosures, landlord-tenant issues, wills, trusts, and more. Appointments available evenings or weekends at their Roselle office or right in your home. Call Guthrie & Brady now at 847-524-1215. That's 847-524-1215. Or visit gnblegal.com. Guthrie & Brady, personal, professional, affordable legal services for all of Chicagoland. The happy lawyers since 1965. That's gnblegal.com. Or 847-524-1215. Guthrie & Brady, trusted legal help made easy, fast, affordable, and experienced. Call today.
As veterans, we're no strangers to helping others.
It's what we were taught, trained, and told to do.
It could be for anything. Helping a friend move.
Listening to a fellow veteran for hours, at any hour of the day.
Or just simply making time for people. A neighbor, a loved one, or even a stranger.
We're often the first to help others. There's no question about it.
But we do have one question for the veterans listening.
When was the last time you reached out for help?
Perhaps it's time to do for yourself what you would do for others.
If you or someone you know needs resources, whether it's for stress, finances, employment, or mental health, don't wait. Reach out.
Find more information at va.gov/reach. That's va.gov/reach.
Brought to you by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and the Ad Council.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Ever tried balancing a dozen eggs in one hand while hopping on one foot? Or maybe juggling cats while riding the unicycle? Sounds ridiculous, right? But guess what? That's exactly what texting while driving is like. Your human brain only has the capacity to focus on one thing at a time. So when you're behind the wheel, give driving your undivided attention.
Don't drive distracted. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Join your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt on our weekly radio hour, Chief Guard of the Republic, where we talk about all things national security, defense, personal security, safety, and dealing with law enforcement situations. Call in 847-931-1410. Ask us questions. We will get you answers. Every week, Saturday, noon to 1 on 1410 AM WRMN Elgin. Streaming on WRMN1410.com. Chat with us on WRMN's YouTube live channel.
Hi, everyone. We're back live. This is Paul Burvitt and Marla on the Chief Guard of the Republic radio show, WRMN 1410. So as we were talking before the break, we were talking about the famous and infamous 1967 Oak Lawn tornado. That's a memory to many people. Well, that tornado is claimed to have taken 33 lives. Okay,
a lot of those were children. Sadly, tragically.
Yes. And there was actually one of the deaths was in Chicago when it went to the skip to Chicago. So the area that got hit the most was the area around 87 to 95th Street, and there was Marla mentioned the roller rink. The theater at the Starlight Drive-In,
95th and
around 6400 West 95th. So it would be almost near Ridgeland.
Okay.
It had a bench screen. The tornado ripped through the Fairway Supermarket, Fisher's Motel, Sherwood Forest Restaurant, Schutt's Windwood Lodge, the Suburban Gas Station, and the Suburban Transit Authority, which was the Suburban Transit Company, which had a depot over there, and it had 3 buses that were just lifted. I'm talking at the time, 1940s, 50s city buses that were piled on top of each other.
My father and mother and I drove on afterwards. Maybe it was even that weekend, or maybe the weekend after. I don't remember, but I don't think it was too long after it occurred. And I actually saw all this destruction. I don't think we went too close to. I think we went a little. I don't think we saw the roller rink, but maybe But that said, a few weeks later, we were driving down, and my aunt lived over in Oak Lawn actually, and near Chicago Ridge Mall, near the Simmons School, and I think we were going to visit her and her family, and I remember seeing all this, and I actually did see the roller rink, but it wasn't right away, and it was just like, torn down buildings. This was terrible, and again, for a six-year-old to see this and to remember this, just like remember the. You were a year older, right? The snow and all that. And we were going to talk about airplane crash things too, but it was really, really tragic. Now, I assume other agencies and other fire departments came in to help.
They
police,
did.
Right?
There was a big response. The National Guard, the state police, and in fact, the President Johnson and the then governor declared it a disaster area.
International news.
It did, and
I didn't know.
There was an interesting thing. There was a receipt that was found in Benton Harbor, Michigan, from the Clark gas station, and it was filled out by a guy that was in the tornado. So the receipt was blown all the way from Chicago to Benton Harbor, Michigan. So that cell was very strong, and it was a very bad.
There's actually a picture. You probably have seen it. We used to go to Corvettes, if any of you remember that, as in our youth at 88th and what is it?
87th
8800 South Cicero Avenue.
Yeah.
In Burbank, Illinois.
No, that's Oak Lawn.
Oak Lawn, Illinois. And there's a picture, that's the one that's most famous, I think, if you look at this on the internet, of this big, is that the word is tornado? It's like
Funnel
a
cloud.
funnel cloud. And I never saw that. That would have scared the whatever out of me. But and it does to this day, if I look at that picture, it frightens me. To think that, what happened. There's actually, again, people on, whether it's on the social media, that actually say they saw this kind of thing live. I didn't see it live. I just saw the beginning, the before and the after.
There's a actual, I think on
Yeah.
YouTube, there's an audio recording of it. Somebody that was in the
Yes.
Choral Theater.
The library actually has that at Oak Lawn.
The
That's right. They were in the theater.
Yeah,
I think
well,
he was the manager.
yeah, and then he was recording people for a class or something like that. And
No,
then
he didn't. You're right.
Yeah. On April the 22nd, President Lyndon Johnson and Governor Otto Kerner declared it a disaster area, and more than 700 guardsmen patrolled the area, and it was said to be like at that time the worst thing, like the destruction of Berlin. Okay, we've got some other things we want to cover. About 12 years later, 11, 12 years, there was a blizzard in Chicago known as the Blizzard of 1979. Okay. And
I actually remember that too. I actually remember that.
It was from January the 12th to January the 14th. Yeah. Okay. And just in that 2-day time period, this is going to be interesting when you think about it. There was now the blizzard of 67 was 23 inches of snow. The blizzard of 79 was 20.3 inches of snow. Now, that entire winter of 78, 79, the Chicago area had 88.4 inches of snow. Okay, so snow came before it and snow came after it.
I was busing it to school, and back then we took CTA buses or transit buses. There were not like private school buses. And I remembered from my school, I had to get off the bus and walk about 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 city blocks to reach the building. And I remember thinking that what a good leg workout I was getting. And it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad in terms of being outside, that you were freezing and you couldn't move. But it was difficult a little bit in that it was high. It was walkable, but it was very high and it was a little bit cold, but it wasn't, you couldn't get through. Where the buses were, I don't think that was so bad to move around though.
It was
not like 67.
It eventually became that way, and I'm glad you pointed that out. The problem was, and the people in Chicago will remember, that was a primary election year, and it was an election year. And what happened was there was a problem with the lack of snow removal.
Right.
Because, as I said, we had 88 inches that year. And the primary that year was in February 27th.
Yeah.
So what was happening was the streets were still impassable because of ice, and
buses could get through the park.
They could, but people were having a hard time, and that lack of snow removal has been cited as one of the factors that Mayor Blandick had lost the election. Okay, and that Mayor Byrne had come in to be the new mayor of Chicago. So it was a very unusual circumstance that year, primarily because there was 88 inches of snow and there was a lack of snow removal. Now, what the problem was, and a lot of it was the CTA. The CTA have trains that have electric motors, and a lot of the motors have open spots.
No, they're talking about trains, not buses.
Yeah, but trains.
The train system. Okay.
And there, it came to actually happen that they had to virtually replace every single electric motor on their trains within the year because they were all damaged from shortages, shorting and overheating, and it had a dramatic impact on the people and the transportation in Chicago. I mean, it wasn't as bad on the surface streets, but it was on the side streets. The main thoroughfares, if you live near there, that was okay. But the people that relied on the L and the trains had a tremendous problem getting anywhere, and it had a detrimental impact on the transportation, and also the plows weren't working because they couldn't get down to the bare road, and it created a huge problem. So that was the blizzard of '79. Now we're gonna segue to a little bit of a change, and this is something that I know Marla knows a lot about, and that I also know a lot about, is the Great Chicago Loop flood. Now, the Loop flood in Chicago was considered to be a man-made disaster, and it happened April 13th, 1992. Okay.
And we were both employed downtown in a Loop back then.
We were, and I was at work that day. Were you at work that day?
I was a graduate student at night in Chicago, but not downtown. And I had a real big test, and I took off of work. I had a vacation day. I was not downtown that day, and I just remembered I was my classes were starting. I think my class started 6:30. I had to leave home by 6, and I was watching the 4 or 5 p.m. news, and all I kept thinking was, "Oh, I'm so glad I didn't go to work today." But that said, um, what happened was I remember my dad worked downtown too, and his company they were able to leave half the day. They closed down, so he didn't have that much trouble. Although it took 2 hours to get home, where it would normally take an hour on the bus. But what was so strange about that to me is I was a person that used to like to go to all the stores on State Street when there were a lot of stores I liked to go to. And I remember that reading that some of those retail operations, the older ones, had basements and sub basements and sub basements that I wasn't aware of. There was I think you know that there was a tunnel system in the Loop, and some of those established stores would store their products or clothing or whatever else they were selling in sub basements. And the one thing I could tell you is I waited a week or two before I would go back shopping. But I remember for about a month, I would just walk in the store and everything smelled like I want to say it smelled like the lake or a fish tank that needed to be cleaned. And I thought to myself, I don't want to buy anything from these stores until it, clears out. But it was a horrible disaster. I think a lot of money spent on
Billions of dollars.
and it's a tragedy, obviously. But could it have been prevented?
Yes, it was $2 billion.
It could have been prevented.
Yeah, as Marla rightly pointed out, in the late 1890s, they created
Tunnel system,
a railway tunnel system under the stores.
Yeah.
And what was done, it was done to transmit coal for their furnaces and also mail and products. And some of these tunnels were not done properly, and they didn't get the proper permits because they were underground. But anyway, there was a whole railway corporation for under the ground. And what happened was, as they didn't need the coal or the transportation anymore, they converted it to cables, no, telecommunications cable, okay? And a lot of people forgot about this underground railway system. So what happened was there was a piling by one of the bridges that the city had contracted with a company to repair it, okay? And it was the Great Lakes Dredge and Dock Company, okay? And they, the city wanted it done a certain way. And they told the city that if they did it their way, it might damage the bridge tender's house. So the city said, okay, change it, and they moved it.
There's a house for a bridge.
Yeah, they stay in there to raise a load of bridges. They changed it to 3.5 feet. Okay, and when they sunk the pile in there, it did something to the soft clay in one of the tunnels, and it eventually caused it to breach. Now, there was a guy down there doing work, and he informed the city before this happened. He says, you know, you've got an infusion of clay in one of the tunnels. This might not be good. And the city went down there and they checked it out, and they said, yeah, okay, we know about it and everything, right? So then this one day in April, okay, what happened was people in the sub basements realized water was coming into their buildings. So they contacted the city. So the city didn't know where the water was coming from, had no idea. Okay. So they thought that one of their water mains had ruptured. So what they did is they shut down all the main water mains in the loop, which is why people were told to evacuate, because there was no water, you know, both for fire and for using bathrooms and for drinking and eating. So that's why there was people were told to leave. Okay, and some people still stayed. Okay, and they still didn't know where the water was coming from. Okay, and then one of the buildings reported, as it said, reported that there were fish in their basement. Okay, and then they knew that it was coming from the Chicago River. Okay, so actually a reporter was walking by, and he saw the proverbial drain swirling, and he notified the city, and they know immediately what was happening then. And they got together with some people in the concrete industry, and they decided that they would use a special kind of cement that sets up. I believe it was Larry Langford from WMAQ is the one that saw it. And what they did is they used this special quick setting cement that they, at first they tried to drop mattresses in there to plug it up, but that didn't work. So then they used this quick, mattress.
Where was the water coming from?
It was from the Chicago River.
Where was that? On Randolph? On State
I
Street?
believe it was Kinsey. I believe
Kinsey
it was.
and what?
The Kinsey Street Bridge. So it's by Kinsey. So the water was then, they then plugged it up with the cement, and it acted, and then it took several days to dry it out at a then cost of $1.95 billion, which would be the equivalent of about $4 billion in today's money. But, you know, a lot of people couldn't go to work for a whole week or so, and, you know, they lost a lot of business and things like that. Now, in keeping with this, the following year, this is more region-wide than specifically Chicago-wide. There was what is called the Great Midwest Flood of 1993, okay? And people out west in our western area will remember that, because that is when the Mississippi River overflowed its boundaries.
Did that hit Illinois?
Well, it hit Illinois because
Chicago?
it borders it. Yeah, and in fact, I had taken my parents to a casino one time, and I won this prize on a slot machine, and we call him Cash the Pig. You know, it's a big stuffed pig. I keep him in a car, and you know, I had to buy a T-shirt for him because he was flooded. You know, because the casino was on the Mississippi River, so their whole storage area got flooded. So they dried them out and they gave them away as like a gift. So I got this big pig, but he had a water stain on him. So I liked him so much, I just bought a T-shirt on him, and I keep him in my car. We call him Cash the Pig. But yeah, it was weird because it was like 1 year after the man-made flood in Chicago. This was a natural disaster. Okay, now moving back to natural disasters, we have another blizzard, and that would be the blizzard of 1998, 1999. And the reason why I say
I remember 2 in a row. I don't remember the year, but I do remember.
It started.
It was busting at downtown that time.
It started the night before,
yeah,
like on New Year's Eve, and it went into New Year's Day.
For those people that lived in this metropolitan Chicagoland area and had to take a bus to work in the Loop, you remember because you had to trudge through it, right?
Right.
Walk through the. I was, yeah.
And it was
both ways.
It was quite the quite the event. Now, what's really interesting about it is, and we kind of talked about
which year, 98, 99?
Yeah, it was really January, but
actually, all right.
But what's really kind of unique about it is, again, the snow totals. Okay, the snow total on this one was, again, now 21.3 inches. Okay, and so the other ones were 23, 20.3, and now we're 21. Well, this one was 21.6 inches. So we're back into the 21 inch over a 3-day period. Okay?
So, you know, word of the wise, obviously, if you're going to be living in this area, you need to have extra, clothing and boots and everything.
And
you never know.
Something.
Right.
Batteries, charged, flashlights, things like that.
You probably do too. I keep reserves. I always stock up before, you know, winter starts, because I know I may not get out to the store as easily, or the store may not have anything, right?
Right.
It's we always take things for granted now, some people, and you can't do that.
So
see, how did your dog fare in the winter? He was able to, you know, in the hot, but he had a larger dog. Your dog was how big? 40 pounds?
Yeah, he didn't. No, he was like 100 pounds. He didn't go. He just went out and came back in. He didn't play in the snow that much. I mean, when he first saw it, he'd run around.
I had an 8-pound Maltese, and we'd have to shovel a little path to the tree or the backyard and let him out. He liked his little thing we set up for him.
I'd like to give a shout out to Jeff, and also Cleveland Dennis is responding that he remembers seeing the news video showing repair workers dropping mattresses into the Chicago River. You're right, Cleveland Dennis. I actually was down there when they were doing that, which was kind of crazy. You know, I worked in the state of Illinois building, and we were one of the buildings that had the fish. And
did you see them?
Oh yeah, and then we you know,
were they little?
Yeah, I did. Okay, we're taking our second break now. We'll be back with Chief Guard of the Republic and we have some more interesting facts for you.
Want to read some action-packed, exciting pulp fiction? Read the works of Michael Tooman, now featuring their international crime thriller, I Married a Bot Madam. Available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle editions. The paperback is also available at other book retailers. Check out Michael Tooman's webpage at Scilink.net. That's Papa Sierra Yankee Lima India November Kilo dot November Echo Tango. Join your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt on our weekly radio hour, Chief Guard of the Republic, where we talk about all things national security, defense, personal security, safety, and dealing with law enforcement situations. Call in 847-931-1410. Ask us questions. We will get you answers. Every week, Saturday, noon to 1 on 1410 AM WRMN Elgin. Streaming on WRMN1410.com. Chat with us on WRMN's YouTube Live channel.
Your hometown radio station since 1949. We are WRMN AM 1410 Elgin time, 1 o'clock.
Elgin isn't just a city, it's a community built on connection, innovation, and opportunity. And at the heart of it all is the Elgin Chamber of Commerce. For over a century, the Elgin Chamber has helped local businesses grow, connecting entrepreneurs, advocating for progress, and inspiring the leaders of tomorrow. Whether you're a new business just starting out or an established company looking to expand, the Elgin Chamber is your partner for success. Join a powerful network of leaders making a difference in our community every day. Together, we're shaping the future of Elgin one connection at a time. Elgin Area Chamber of Commerce, where business and community grow together. Call now 847-741-5660 or go to info@elginchamber.com. Contact Carol Gieske.
Hi, everyone. This is the Chief Guard of the Republic radio show with your co-hosts today, Paul Burvitt and Marla Mutis, every Saturday, noon till 2 on WRMN 1410, the Fox River Valley Media Network, streaming live on WRMN1410.com. The studio number is voice 847-931-1410. Text number is 505-926-1410, or contact us in the comments on Facebook Live, WRMN 1410 channel. We left off talking about the blizzard of 98, 99, which was 21.6 inches. Okay. Now, there's two blizzards that happened almost on the same day on the calendar, but different years. The first one is in 2011, the famous Groundhog Day blizzard of 2011, which was a 21.2-inch blizzard, again, in Chicago. Now, what's interesting about this blizzard is that it started again on the 31st of January, and it went all the way through till Groundhog Day. And on that day, you remember this if you lived here, there were 700 people in cars that were stranded on Lakeshore Drive.
I had to go to work, and I wasn't working in the loop back then, but I used to drive to work, and I had to take the bus all those days. I'm glad there were buses available, but I clearly remember trudging through, and I only lived 7 houses from Pulaski, so I had to, I just had to make it east of Pulaski, so I had to make it to Pulaski, and then I was smooth sailing but it's, you think back then what you could do, and I think if I had to do that now, it would be really, as I'm older, difficult. So I could imagine the trouble people had, especially people that, again, I was nearer to the bus line, and there on my block there were, 4 or 5 blocks east of me that they'd have to trudge through all that, and not everybody shoveled their sidewalk and whatever. So I mean, we got through it. It was fine, but I clearly remember it. And do you remember?
Oh, I do,
Yeah,
because
you
I
were
remember
downtown probably.
I was, and I was coming home, and I had to go to court out west, and my friends were telling me don't come in, but I went in, and it was horrible driving home, and
At least your car worked.
what I remember was though that the people that got stuck on Lakeshore Drive,
I remember that,
the
yeah.
buses kind of got jammed up and people couldn't get off, and they knew it was coming for several days before, but there was no one expected it to be like that. And my dad was alive, and I remember it took me 45 minutes to get from around State Street in my car to Halsted.
When these snow blizzards happen, because I have a feeling some of these dates you mentioned, especially in the 70s and 80s, when I was working exclusively in the loop, and most of the time taking the bus, I remember days where I'd have a 40-minute. Well, it used to take me about an hour to get home, maybe 45 minutes if I was lucky. And I remember those days I would be getting home like 11 at night. And it was just like for 4 hours on the bus. Uh, you're stuck on either on the Archer Avenue or on the Stevenson Expressway, and then once in a while the bus drive they would be told to divert to another street, and you may not even know where you're going, and they wouldn't have the normal route, and so people like us. Paul usually got out of work earlier though. He would come to work real early. I was more standard hours, and you'd have to come home 10:30, 11, and do it again in the morning and leave early. So, I mean, it was memorable. I think a lot of people now don't have to experience something like that, but we did.
I remember it took me 45 minutes to get
It's
from
not a
basically State
block,
Street
yeah, 3-4
to
blocks.
get
Yeah.
to get to Halsted.
My father worked up near the
Actually, it was Canal, and then
Oak Street, and that'd be an extra hour or two to get from the north of the, what do you call that area? Michigan Avenue
Yeah.
area to get to the State Street. So it was really.
It was, and I remember I called my dad and he didn't answer the phone, and I was worried, and I called him, and it took me another 45 minutes to get to Western, and I finally picked the phone up and I said, "Were you outside?" I was yelling at him, and then it took me another hour to get from Archer and basically Western to my house. I was in the car for 3 hours that day.
I've done more than 3, but it could happen.
And then,
and you're like, why didn't I go into the,
There was another blizzard, also again, in January to February 2nd in 2015, and that too was 19.3 inches. So,
I remember that one
our blizzards traditionally are 19 to 20, 21, 23 inches. And that was again on Groundhog Day in 2015.
I remember that one.
I was retired, so I was home.
I wasn't, I was working.
And I remember that. Now, we're going to make a little bit of a transition here to something also kind of meteorological, but not necessarily the same, okay? A lot of people don't know that Lake Michigan can have what they used to call seiches.
How do you spell that?
I believe it's S-E-I-C-H-E, but it's now considered to be a metro tsunami or a meteo tsunami. So it's METEOTSUNAMIS. So the most significant.
It's a standing wave that turns in a enclosed or partially enclosed body of water. So it's a standing wave that moves.
Right.
Okay.
So what happened was
never knew
on June the 26th, 1954, one of these seiches or meteo tsunamis came about, and a 10-foot wave struck Lake Michigan in Chicago, and 8 fishermen near the shore were swept to their death. Now, a lot of people don't remember this, but it's kind of significant, so that people need to understand that the body of water, you can get tidal forces.
It says it could happen from an earthquake in an enclosed smaller body of water.
Right. Now,
or atmosphere or wind.
Right. This one was from the atmosphere, but you can get an earthquake because
pressure change.
Because the lake is like a bathtub. If you shake it, it moves. The water moves to one end, and that's what happened. And these poor fishermen all died. They were swept away in this wave that they couldn't fight it. And that was on June the 26th, 1954. Now, that's important because I want you to remember that year. So my dad got on the police department that year, and he always told me about a story about this great flood of 1954. Okay. And what happened was he told me that he had taken public transportation to the station, and it was October the 9th through the 11th. And he said that he had to go back home and all of the viaducts were flooded. And he said he took his
You
gun
know, when a
belt.
viaduct's flood, your bus can't go
Right.
through, your car can't go
Right.
through, and people can't walk through.
Right. And he
So you
said
have to
that he took
yeah.
his gun belt off and held it over his head, and he had to like try to swim the viaduct. So we got like 11 inches of rain in a 48-hour period. And that was really unheard of. Okay. And what happened was it caused the sewers to back up and things like that, and it was very dramatic. Okay, so this was in Chicago. This was a little bit before my time, but I heard stories about it, and it was this this great flood incident, and a lot of people, you know, are either not alive or they don't remember it, that things like that could happen. And it's kind of interesting when you think about it, because, you know, we're so close to Lake Michigan and we depend on it for our drinking water, for shipping, and for recreation, that it is a body of water. And, you know, we need to respect it, and we need to always be aware that, you know, anything could happen, even in Lake Michigan. You know, thankfully, we don't have sharks or anything like that, but we do have natural things like undertows, swift currents, or these meteo tsunamis or seishes or whatever you want to call them, that it's really important to remember that, you know, when you're boating or when you're at the beach, you need to, you know, practice safety, and you need to be with people that, you know, can watch out for you, because, you know, tragically, we don't want anything to happen, because we have such a beautiful area here, you know, and it goes all the way up, you know, all the way around Michigan. It goes to Wisconsin, it goes to Indiana. So there's a lot of beautiful places on the lake that are nearby, and we need to know and, you know, respect that. Did you have anything to say about those?
Why don't you continue on and on?
Okay. All right.
Nothing more really. No.
The last portion of the show today that I like to talk about are not like weather related or man-made meteorological related. I'd like to talk about some tragedies that happen. And what we're talking about is plane crashes. Okay. And, you know, there's Chicago's got an unusual history with planes. I just like to point out that in 1912, in the area known as Clearing, there was an aerodrome. And in fact, there was a world air race flown there in 1912. Okay. So the Chicago area has a lot of significance in aviation. And Charles Lindbergh used to fly mail planes here in the 20s. And
I remember in 1909 they had the airport.
Right.
I remember reading that.
There were airports in the Scottsdale area. There were airports in Burbank. There were airports, yes, and there were airports in Bridgeview, Illinois. And then there were airports in Crestwood, and there were airports all around here. And it was, you know, Chicago was a big hub for aviation. And the big thing was Midway Airport. Now, Midway Airport is kind of unique. It's one of the few airports now that are within the actual city limits. Okay. It's actually within the city, okay? And, you know, it's 1 mile by 1 mile, and it's right in the city. I mean, my whole life, I've always lived in pretty much the shadow of Midway, except for a couple of years when I lived in Mount Greenwood. I've always lived either near or in a path to Midway Airport my entire life. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about was something that my dad told me about. My dad was, I think I mentioned this before, was a Chicago police officer, but for a short time he was a detective. It was they used to have station detectives and things like that, and he was a detective at one point in time assigned to Midway Airport. Okay, and on July 17th, 1959, there was a kind of a significant accident that occurred, and a lot of people talk about it. It was a twin-engine Braniff airliner, and what happened was it was coming in for a landing, which at the time I believe was on the northwest corner of the airport. It was coming in, and there was a gas station across the street, and it clipped the landing gear, kind of clipped a 15-foot high electric sign over the gas station. Okay, and what happened was the plane came down, and there was a crash. 22 people were killed, and 21 people were injured.
Now, this is at Midway, around which street, in the 50s? Or
Yeah, it was around 55th and Central. So the plane was coming in, and it was a Convair, I believe it was a Convair 340, I might be mistaken.
I've heard of this one.
And then it crashed, and they said that there would be a more significant loss of life had it not been for the airfield attendants, the police, and the firemen who got there right away. And it was really kind of strange. I believe there's I don't know if it's this crash or another one, but there's actually a tie-in. One of the people that was involved in this crash or something like that was also, I think, one of the victims of the Oakland tornado. I know I read.
I remember reading this.
I remember there was some publication that mentioned that. But yeah, this was a major thing. It was called the July 17th, 1955 Braniff Air crash. Now, also in the 1950s, and my father mentioned this to me too, was the famous TWA Flight 595 crash. Okay, now this was a TWA cargo flight that was operated into Chicago, and it was what they called a Lockheed L1049H Super Constellation. So the Lockheed Constellation was considered to be like the, hey, shout out to Mike, he's listening in Alabama. So hope you're doing well down there. So what happened is TWA ran this Super Constellation, and actually at the time, this was a Constellation became one of the original Air Force Ones for the president. It was a 4-engine plane. Actually, you see it if you ever watch the end of can't think of it now. The movie about the 1960s with Ronnie Howard and all of them, the American Graffiti. That's the plane people took. This was the major plane for flying across the Atlantic and stuff like that. Well, this one was operated as a cargo flight. So it was the number 2 engine. Shortly after departure, they got a warning light. Okay, so they requested a turn back, and on their final approach, they banked excessively, and they exceeded the 45-degree angle, and they sank rapidly. And at 5:35 a.m., they landed on a residential area a quarter of a mile away from the airport. Now, the Constellation had a crew of 3, okay? But 8 people on the ground were killed in that crash. Now, that might have been the crash that I'm thinking about for the guy from that also had a connection to the Oakland tornado. But so there were 2 significant crashes at Midway, okay, that had occurred in the late 1950s, which were kind of, they kind of were kind of concerning to people, and there were changes made regarding them. Now, there's another crash that I'd like to talk about that I think Marla knows a lot about, and that is the famous crash of United, 553, which occurred on December the 8th, 1972. Do you remember that?
I remember it just like when I was there.
Okay. You want to, you're
I don't
kind of,
know a real lot, but
you're kind of an eyewitness, so
sort of.
you want to, and then I'll tell you an eyewitness testimony of a friend of mine who's now living out of state, and then I'll tell you my story about it. So you want to tell us what you
did that happen? Like
it was in the late afternoon, probably
1:30.
I don't remember.
I was in
Just before school would get out.
I was in public grade school, and I was at a first floor classroom, and my classroom windows faced south, and I was facing west. And I remember my teacher, and my teacher had half the window shades down and half were up by him. And my teacher was instructing, and then all of a sudden, and he was a person that was always very straight faced and not a lot of emotion. And I knew him for, since I was in school. I delivered in the 7th grade, as I mentioned. So I knew him for about, 8 years maybe, that he was one of the administrators at the school. And he's deceased now, but I remember he was teaching, and then he sort of would have a habit of looking out the window and rubbing his eyes. And I remember that he rubbed his eyes, and he I don't know if the right word is bugged his eyes out. He just, ran to the window, and he was near the window, but he ran closer to the window and stared where the plane crashed. And I remember I was watching him, and then all of a sudden I heard, and I never heard this again, I heard, it was from behind me, like a teacher was there, the plane crash was over there in the 70s, 7000 South. And I was only 2 blocks away from the crash because they were trying to land in my school lot. And they didn't make it. And I guess what happened, I do remember though, I heard I heard a large boom. And then I heard maybe there was a hesitation, maybe about 30 seconds later, I heard a big, it was like boom, and then boom. And then I remember 2-3 minutes later, all our electric went out in the school. And I remember we were supposed to get out. This was around right after lunchtime, 1 something. And I remember we were supposed to get off the school, and I couldn't get out for hours.
We're taking our final break, so we'll be back shortly.
It was very frightening. And then we'll talk after the break. Afterwards, we went and saw it over the weekend. This was a Friday, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I am a non-attorney spokesperson representing a team of lawyers who help people that have been injured or wronged. If you've been involved in a serious car, truck, or motorcycle accident or injured at work, you have rights, and you may be entitled to money for your suffering. Don't accept an offer you get from an insurance company until you talk to a lawyer. And we represent some of the best personal injury lawyers you can find. Tough lawyers that will fight to win your case. And they're so good they stake their reputation on it by only getting paid if you win. So if you've been in a serious car, truck, or motorcycle accident or hurt on the job, find out today for free what kind of compensation you may be entitled to. Call the legal helpline right now.
800-257-3148. 800-257-3148. 800-257-3148. That's 800-257-3148.
If you turned 65 recently like me, it's important you find a Medicare Advantage plan that gives you the coverage you're looking for. But finding one can be difficult. The best thing I did, and I suggest you do the same, is call a licensed insurance agent and let them walk you through your Medicare Advantage plan options. There are so many benefits you have access to, so make the call now and let the representatives explain everything to you. Our licensed insurance agents can offer you a variety of Medicare Advantage plans. Plus, the call is free, the information is free, and there's no obligation to enroll. We're here to make it easy for you to select a Medicare Advantage plan that may work for your needs. Finding a Medicare Advantage plan can be easy if you do what I did. Make a quick call right now to learn more. Thank you.
800-433-3082. 800-433-3082. 800-433-3082. That's 800-433-3082.
Are you prepared for an emergency or disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Don't find yourself saying,
I'll trust water bottles and a flashlight to save the day, but I'll be proved wrong.
With a tornado approaching, I'll realize that I like a wheelchair-accessible shelter.
When the floodwaters rise, I'll be up in the attic with 20 cans of beans. It's a recipe for disaster.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Get started at ready.gov/older adults. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Does your car need a shine? At Britain's Touchless Car Wash, they make it quick, easy, and spotless every time. And they're open 24/7 for your convenience. Right now, get a free car wash just for joining their text club. Text BRITT to 30400 and enjoy a free car wash. Visit Britain's Touchless Car Wash at 1923 Larkin Avenue in Elgin or at 555 Willow in West Dundee. Britain's, caring for your car while caring for our community.
Kick off your weekend with a little flair. It's Dino's Night Out, every Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. on WRMN 1410 AM. Dino brings you the best of the Fox Valley's entertainment scene. Live music, local artists, street festivals, great eats, and the personalities behind them. If it's happening, Dino's talking about it. And bringing the spotlight is none other than the legendary Arcada Theater, located at 105 East Main Street in St. Charles. Catch dinner, drinks, and a show, all under one historic roof. So whether you're making plans or just love to know what's hot, make it a date with Dino's Night Out, Fridays, 2 to 4 p.m. on WRMN 1410 AM, or stream it live at WRMN1410.com. Dino's Night Out, powered by the Arcada Theater, where Fox Valley comes to play.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the Chief Guard of the Republic. This is the final segment of the show for today with your co-hosts Paul Burvitt and Marla Mutis. Okay, we're talking about the United Airlines Flight 553, and we're talking about the crash that occurred on December the 8th, 1972. Marla's giving us her impressions because she was in the school approximately a block or two away from the crash.
For those of you that just joined quickly, I was in grade school. I was in 7th grade. My teacher was looking. I was on the first floor. My teacher was looking out the window. He just stared in shock, ran out to the principal's office, which was right next door. He was actually the assistant principal, I think. I mentioned that I heard, I didn't see it because our drapes were, our blinds were half down. His were open. I was in the back of the room. The plane crash happened behind me, but they were trying to land in my school lot. And I remember I heard I noticed his reaction. He ran out, but he actually was running out the door to the principal's office as the plane was crashing. And I heard a big boom. And about maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds later, I heard a boom. And 2, 3 minutes later, my electric went out. Our electric went out. We had no lights at the school. And I was supposed to get out of school like 2 hours later. They wouldn't let us leave. Um, uh, Parents were not allowed to pick up the kids for about maybe 3 hours. And my father worked downtown, and he was afraid because you don't know. Back then, we didn't have the media. They didn't have phone lines went down, I guess, and so he just took. I guess he took a bus home, or a cab. I don't know, but and then they found out everybody was safe. But we actually knew people that were in those houses. That there's 2 people I believe that died in a house, and they never. I don't know if they ever recovered the bodies. There were three houses involved. The airline was very good and put the people up at a hotel, paid for everything. Guess rebuilt the houses for the people that lived. But I knew a lady. My mother knew actually. Her son went to the private school, and he was home and I guess in the shower, and I guess the shower they were okay, but I guess the shower was shaking, and her kitchen cabinets came down. And I remember then, and it was snow over the weekend. This was a Friday, another
I
Friday.
think so.
Friday. Okay. I remember on Saturday and Sunday. I remember the police. We drove by. My mom was a little curious. Probably I was too. And we drove by and we saw all it didn't go away right away because of the weather conditions. And obviously they had monitor or do a crime. Is it crime scene? I don't know. It's
Well,
crime scene.
investigation.
Investigation. So and so, it took quite a while, couple weeks at least, if not months, for this thing to get cleared out. And now when you see it, if you drive over there, there's I think 3 yellow brick houses, and they look new. But it was just a tragedy. And for someone like me, from the perspective of a kid growing up, because I was about 12 when it was December 72. I was 12, 12 and almost 12 and a half, and then it affected me my whole life. I've always lived near an airport. I still live near an airport, but um, it's something you never forget. As I never forgot the tornado and the snowstorms, and it's just a history of in my life that I'll always remember. But I feel bad for the people whose lives were lost and impacted in some way by this tragedy. And you actually remembered as well, but I was only 2 blocks away.
Could you feel the rumble of the ground? No.
No rumble.
When I was
I heard it though, and I said like it was a boom, and then 30 seconds later it was a long like boom, and you said, "Oh, that would be the end of the plane."
Yeah.
Okay, no, nothing rumbled, nothing shook in my classroom. No blinds. I was next to the blinds. Nothing shook. No.
I had a friend who was an investigator, and he was with, I think, his uncle or grandfather. They were picking somebody up from that Mary Star of the Sea. Is that the school near there?
No, that's farther away. That's 3 blocks away.
But
Queen of the Universe was the one over there.
But then it was Queen of the Universe. Then
yeah, and I was at Hurley.
He said he saw like a green flash and the fire, and then he heard the explosion, and he said it was wild.
I'm just audio.
I had the mumps for almost the entire month.
Now you
of
lived
July.
over on 79th and
I lived at
Cicero?
77th and Keating. Okay,
Near Cicero. So
which
you
is
were
fine.
farther away.
Yeah,
I was the one real
but
close.
we could feel it and we could hear it.
Feel what?
The ground shake a little bit, rumble,
Right.
and the lights twitched a little bit.
My school was well built.
And then they came on.
My light totally went out, and then I guess our our phone went out.
I was home, you know, and I had the mumps, and I was
Did
watching
you hear
TV.
anything?
We heard a little sound, and we felt the ground shake, and then
The
the
first
lights
time or the
twitched
second?
at one time because we were a little bit further
No,
away.
it was definitely too.
Now, there's two interesting things about that crash.
Watergate.
Well, yeah, there was a U.S. Congressman, George Collins. He was on the plane, and he was tragically killed. And then the wife of Howard Hunt, Dorothy Hunt, was on the plane, and she had at the time a case center that had $10,000 in $100 bills, and they never fully explained any of that. Now there were 43 people were killed and 2 on the ground, so 45
house,
people, right?
Hmm.
But I believe some people did survive the plane crash.
Yeah.
But it's kind of amazing when you think about it, about how what a great impact that tragedy had on the neighborhood. And we went there we went there a few years ago for the 50th anniversary, and we looked at it, and you could tell there's, like Marla said, about 3 new homes over there. They're not exactly like the ones that were originally there, but you could tell. But without knowing the reason why they were there, you know, you would not know anything.
You know, just like Paul mentioned earlier, and we're not going to get into everything, but Paul mentioned, you know, I used to live in Clearing for a while too, about 7 years. And it's amazing to know that there were air races. It's amazing to know some of the cemeteries around Chicago. There were, what was it, dog races or something?
Horse races.
I'm sorry, horse races, horse race track. It's just amazing to know there were little airports here or there. And I think a lot of that, as the generations move on, is going to be forgotten. And I think history should be recorded.
I think
You know,
you're right.
my dad was one of the first people to work in the John Hancock building when it opened, and he told me one time, I think in the early 70s, he told me one time the electric went out and he had to walk up and down. I think he was on I think he said 19th floor or upper teen floor, and it's just history of things and things that just people. Or you mentioned the tsunami like thing in the lake that could repeat itself. You know, it's just different. But what did this all do to you, Paul? What did it makes you think more, right? About things.
It does.
History, and
It
Paul
does.
likes history a lot.
It does, and it makes you think of there's so much that
History.
we don't know or remember that you know, people would be surprised, and if nothing else, it adds a dimension of character to things and places. Keeping in that vein, I was in college, and it was about a year before I was going to graduate college. It was a year before my graduation, and I remember that I was home. I think I was through with my classes already, and I was watching TV, and they came in with the report that American Airlines Flight 191 had crashed at O'Hare on May the 25th, 1979.
Yeah.
Okay. And, you know, I have a friend who actually went out to the site because they didn't know what it was. They didn't know if it was a criminal event or whatever. And what happened was, at that time, they've changed the configuration of the runway. And this kind of bears some importance, though, to something recently. Okay. This was a DC-10. Okay. And a DC-10 is a plane that, you know, at the late 60s, early 70s was considered a wide body jet.
Right.
And at the time, you couldn't fly 2-engine jets commercially over the oceans. You had to have more than 2 engines. They required 3 or 4. And they put 2 jet engines on the wings and 1 in the tail. That's why it was a DC-10. It's now known as I think a Boeing something 11 now, but it was flying from runway 32R. And what happened was, shortly after takeoff, it pitched, and then it kind of cartwheeled over. And what they discovered was the engine on the one side had fallen off and went over and impacted the other engines and the control surfaces of the plane, and it crashed. And tragically, 271 people on the plane, all of them perished, and 2 on the ground, for a loss of 273 people. Now, to this date, that is the worst airliner fatality crash in the United States to this date. You know, we're talking 47 years now. So, but we're also talking something else. The kind of the version of the plane is still being used as a cargo hauler by FedEx and by Global, okay? And they were using them on UPS, and recently there was a very similar crash, I believe in Louisville, and the engine fell off, and it went into the the engine in the tail, and then it caused the plane to crash. So there's a current stand down order on these airplanes, but
What do you mean by stand down?
that means they can't use them, okay? But what's interesting about this is FedEx still plans to use these into the 2030s. They have currently, there's 131 of these that are airworthy and flying, and FedEx has 116 of them, and this Western Global has 15 of them. And I believe they think that FedEx is going to still use them into the 2030s, because since the other airliners are now stopping to use them, mainly UPS, the Air Force doesn't use them anymore. They were also used as an Air Force refueling tanker. And I believe that they think that since they're going to have all these other planes, they're going to have a huge amount of spare parts for them. So they're going to use these planes for a while. And it's kind of interesting that almost 50 years after the first crash, a very similar thing happens 50 years later with the other crash, and only, you know, they had been relegated to use as a cargo liner and not for passenger service. So you know, I mean, it's kind of ironic, yet it's.
But they're still in the air.
Well, there's none flying right now,
okay.
because they've recently, I think, given an airworthiness directive on what has to be done, because I think they know that some kind of bushing gave out. I saw a report on that. But it's kind of amazing that a plane from almost 50 years ago crashed. The same thing results in a crash almost 50 years later. And, you know, it's kind of amazing. And I distinctly remember that crash because it was very, very unusual. Now, kind of like the final thing we're going to talk about, I don't know if you remember this, but I do. What happened was on, again, this is really ironic. The crash of United Flight 553 was on December the 8th, 1972. Well, at Midway Airport on December the 8th, 2005, there was another airliner crash.
That's a little boy.
Yes.
I do remember.
And I was actually coming home from work, and I kind of saw a little bit of the aftermath of this. There was there was a little there was a family driving, I believe, on Central Avenue near 55th Street, which is ironically the same area as the crash of the Convair. Okay. And that was July 17th, 1955. And what happened was there was a snowstorm, and
didn't hit the
the airliner couldn't stop.
Yeah, or
But slid off the runway, and it breached the fence, and it fell, and it landed on several cars. And in one of the cars was a 6-year-old boy named Joshua Woods of Leroy, Indiana. And a total of 12 people were injured. 9 were in cars, 3 were on the plane, but poor Joshua died. Okay. And
only 6 years old.
Only 6 years old. And the runway was about 4,500 feet, and they determined that the plane needed 5,300 feet to stop safely. So this December 8th crash was like on the same anniversary as the 72 crash. So that's kind of strange and ironic that they would happen on the same date. But you know, I remember a lot of things about those crashes. You know, they make you always wonder, because whenever I would drive home from work, I would usually drive down Kedzie or Pulaski, and when you look up, you can see little lights in the sky, and you know they're airplanes. They're coming in for a landing, and they're pretty much evenly spaced, but you can see them out for several miles. And then, you know, I always thought, you know, that these people are, you know, they're coming in, and, you know, they're coming in for a landing, and, you know, you wonder, you know, about those people that came in on those planes that were very close to the runway, but never actually made it.
My grandparents, my mother's parents lived at 50th by Cicero, and they were one of the first owners of property, and I think it was the early 40s, 1940s. And I remember them telling me there were only 8 houses on the block. Well, now when you drive, you know, and the same thing with Clearing, where I lived, you know, it wasn't, it was, you said airfield, or it was fields. And so as the need or the want for housing came about, they're in the area. So, I mean, things can happen, you know?
Yeah.
And, but a lot of this is weather related, right? I mean, so,
Yep.
yeah. I don't know. Question, should you have an airport near housing? I don't know. I mean,
Well, I know there's talk about that says that, you know, they probably, I don't think you're going to see them building airports
far away
in city limits. I mean, that was one of the reasons that Mayor Daley used when he took down Meg's, when he did it in the middle of the night.
that was by the lake.
Well, they claimed that was too close to the city limits
Yeah,
and the
okay.
buildings. So I mean, you know, so there's something to be said about that, and about you know, being cautious and things like that. But there's also other things to be cognizant of, you know.
Well,
And then,
we hope today we were able to share a history of, you know, our accounts
yes,
that may or may not be out there that much.
right. And then always remember, I mean, there was in the last break, the station ran a public service announcement. about being prepared and being safe and stuff like that. People should always be prepared and safe no matter what they're doing. And, you know, in the winter, you should always have some kind of energy food in your car, some water. You should always have sand or salt in your car.
An extra jacket.
An extra
shoes.
jacket. You should have a shovel. You should have, like, if you can, traction mats or whatever. And then you should have a charged up cell phone or a way to get in communication
We've
with people.
experienced that, you know, and probably many people viewing, you know, you could have normal weather and then it just comes quick. And when it comes quick, it can obviously impact your travel. And your
Well,
road
we've been
roads and-
places where you get a snow squall and a whiteout where
Yeah.
you can't, yeah, that's
Yes.
happened to me. At
Recently.
least, yeah, but at least
Recently,
3 or
yes.
4 times in my life where, you know, you always want to be able to be able to, you know, in case you're off the road. And then, you know, there's been stories of people being off the road and people not finding. There were a couple of stories about one guy in Indiana. He was off the road in the water for several days and nobody could hear him. And then, you know, you have to remember that all of these cars today have electric windows and the windows don't open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike is texting us, and he's also right about the loop L train derailment in 1977. I remember that because the train fell actually
I remember,
off
but
the
I wasn't
tracks,
there.
and then actually Mayor
I remember
Galandic was there that night, so he's right about that. There was a
Were you down? You weren't downtown.
no, I wasn't.
We're kind of
As
proud
you point out, there was
Yeah.
200 people injured in that one. So there have been rail disasters. There was the IC rail disaster early on, I think in the 70s, where the train crashed into another train, and that was right across the train. You know, I used to take the train down for about a week, and I realized that that wasn't for me. You know, I was, and I took the bus. We took the bus together, and I took the bus for 10 years, and then going to school down there for another 3. And I wasn't a real big fan of the bus because you're like held hostage. I remember in a couple of these snowstorms, you know, I'd leave, and I'd leave early from school or I'd leave early from work, and I wouldn't get home till 9, 10, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning on the bus, and I'd be stuck on the bus on a ramp for an hour. I'd be stuck somewhere else for an hour. I'd be an hour to go somewhere else, an hour to get off. Well, everybody,
behind us.
you guys have a safe week and take care. And remember, take care of your friends, take care of your family, and as always, take it easy and
Enjoy life.
enjoy life. And you know what next Saturday is? It's Valentine's Day. So everybody take care. And this is the Chief Guard of the Republic signing off. Mike, take care in Alabama.
Bye-bye.